Whitaker, the vehicle titles traced back through your shell buyer.
Those cars came from Forvation work and Forvation funds long.
The court found their personal purchases hidden as
I
operations.
built the program that took profit out of drug.
Once is a mistake. Twice is suspicious. Darnell Whitaker did this across 4 years and hundreds of seizures and left a paper trail for every single one. The man who built his career on taking drug money just got caught keeping it.
And then use that same program to buy trophies for
You
yourself.
are not getting shame out of me for running the county the way outsiders never could.
He would not get the chance to explain. The man who had built 3 election victories on a single slogan, "Take the profit out of crime," had spent the last 4 years quietly taking it for himself. $1.1 million, 3 luxury vehicles, a collector-grade muscle car hidden under a canvas tarp in a leased barn outside the county seat. The deputy who exposed him did it with a single time-stamped photograph taken on her department-issued phone. In the 18 months that followed, a state audit would tear apart every forfeiture file in his office, every deposit slip, every quietly retitled vehicle. What they found would put the sheriff in the same state prison system he had spent 31 years feeding. Pay attention to the dollar amount in this case. Now think about how long it took someone inside his own department to do something about it. Drop your guess in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We break down how these schemes actually work every single week. Darnell Whitaker was born on March 14, 1966, in the small town of Cypress Mill in Brawley County. His father, Eldridge Whitaker, ran a Sinclair gas station off Route 19, 2 miles past the county line. His mother, Velma, worked the lunch counter at Brawley County General Hospital 5 days a week and kept the books for the station on Saturdays. The Whitakers were one of 4 black families in Cypress Mill who owned a registered business, and the gas station was a place where men gathered on Sunday afternoons to argue about football and county politics. Darnell grew up listening. By the time he was 12, he was pumping gas after school, counting change at the Chrome NCR register, and watching deputies from the sheriff's department come in for free coffee. The deputies wore polished boots and creased uniforms and carried themselves like they belonged anywhere they walked. Eldridge Whitaker would tell his son, more than once, that the men in those uniforms were the only ones in the county who could change a life with a signature. Darnell believed him. He graduated from Cypress Mill High School in 1984, ranked 28th in a class of 104. He played varsity football for 3 seasons. His coach later told a reporter that Darnell was, quote, "the most disciplined kid I ever coached," end quote. He enrolled at Brawley State Technical College that fall and earned an associate degree in criminal justice in 1986, working nights at the gas station to pay tuition. He applied to the State Law Enforcement Academy in March of 1987. He was accepted on his first try. His academy file described him as, quote, "exceptionally focused, with strong interpersonal skills and a clear sense of mission," end quote. He graduated 13th in a class of 62. His first job was as a patrol deputy with the Brawley County Sheriff's Office, starting on August 12, 1988, at a salary of $19,400. He worked the overnight shift on the western side of the county, the rural stretch where Route 19 runs along the river bottom and the timber companies kept their equipment yards. It was the kind of beat where calls came in slow and the dark stretched for miles. Whitaker spent his nights running radar, breaking up bar fights at a place called the Pine Cone, and answering domestic calls at trailer parks where the porch lights had been broken for years. His evaluations were strong. His first supervisor, Sergeant Calvin Rowe, wrote in the 1991 review that Whitaker was, quote, "a natural leader who handles himself well under pressure and treats every citizen with respect," end quote. He was promoted to corporal in 1992, sergeant in 1995, and lieutenant in 2001. By 2006, he was a captain over patrol operations, the youngest captain the department had ever had. He married Patrice Bell, a registered nurse at Brawley General, in October of 1993. They had 2 children, a son named Marcus and a daughter named Imani. The Whitakers bought a brick ranch house on Magnolia Drive in 2001, 3 blocks from the elementary school. Neighbors described Darnell as the kind of man who mowed his lawn on Saturday mornings and brought casseroles to funerals. In 2010, the sitting sheriff announced his retirement after 24 years in office. Darnell Whitaker filed his candidacy paperwork on the same afternoon. He ran on a single phrase printed in white block letters across blue yard signs. "Take the profit out of crime." He promised to expand the department's civil asset forfeiture program. He promised that drug money seized in Brawley County would fund the department that seized it. He promised that every dollar would be accounted for. He won the general election with 63% of the vote. He was sworn in on January 2, 2011, with his wife holding the family Bible and both children standing beside him. He was 44 years old. He had been a law enforcement officer for 22 years. The forfeiture account he had just been handed sole authority over would, over the next decade, become the single most lucrative and least supervised fund in the county budget. Civil asset forfeiture is a legal mechanism that allows law enforcement to seize cash, vehicles, and property believed to be connected to criminal activity without requiring a criminal conviction. In Brawley County, as in most of the state, the proceeds of those seizures flowed directly into a department-controlled fund. There was no county commission oversight, no independent audit requirement, no external review of how the money was spent. The sheriff was the sole signatory on the account. By statute, the fund could be used for, quote, lawful law enforcement purposes, end quote. In practice, that meant equipment, training, undercover operations, informant payments, and what the statute described only as, quote, operational expenses, end quote. The phrase was deliberately broad. It had been written that way by a state legislature that trusted sheriffs to police themselves. The process for handling a seizure was supposed to work like this. A deputy on a traffic stop would identify cash or property believed to be tied to a drug transaction. The deputy would document the seizure at the scene, photograph the property, and bring it back to the department's evidence room. A supervisor would verify the count. The funds would be deposited into the forfeiture account within 72 hours, accompanied by a deposit slip and a case number. Vehicles would be held pending forfeiture proceedings and, if forfeited, sold at a public auction administered by the department. In Brawley County, every step of that process passed through the sheriff's office. The supervisor verifying the count reported to the sheriff. The deputy making the deposit reported to the sheriff. The auctioneer who sold the forfeited vehicles had been hired by the sheriff and paid out of the fund the sheriff controlled. The vulnerabilities were obvious to anyone who looked. Almost no one looked. In 2011, the first full year of Whitaker's first term, the forfeiture account took in $287,000. By 2014, that figure had grown to $641,000. By 2017, after his second election, the account was clearing $900,000 a year. The department's website carried a running tally of, quote, criminal proceeds returned to the community, end quote. Local newspapers ran feature stories about new patrol vehicles, new K-9 units, new body cameras, all paid for, the stories said, by the criminals themselves. The citizens of Brawley County trusted the sheriff. He had been one of them since he was 12 years old, at a gas station on Route 19. He went to their churches. He coached youth football at the community center. He showed up at every Memorial Day parade in his dress uniform with his hand over his heart. When he stood at the podium and said every dollar is accounted for, they believed him. No one was checking. No one was required to. By the time anyone thought to ask, the sheriff had been quietly running the same play on his own county for almost 4 years. The first skim, according to the eventual indictment, happened in March of 2017. A deputy named Howard Reese had pulled over a rental car on the Route 19 corridor at 2 a.m. The driver, a man from out of state, had a suspended license and a duffel bag containing what Reese later estimated to be between $30,000 and $35,000 in banded cash. Reese photographed the cash on the hood of the rental, secured the driver, and called for a supervisor. The supervisor that night was Major Edwin Halsey, the sheriff's longtime second-in-command. Halsey took possession of the cash and signed the chain of custody form. The next morning, the deposit slip filed with the forfeiture account read $18,400. There is no record of where the difference went. There is no record that Reese ever questioned it. The pattern that emerged over the next 4 years was clinical in its consistency. According to forensic accountants who later reconstructed the fund's transactions, the sheriff and Major Halsey skimmed an average of 30 to 40% off every cash seizure above $20,000. Smaller seizures were left untouched, presumably because the math was not worth the risk. Larger seizures were treated as opportunities. The skim was always documented as a, quote, in-field expenditure for confidential informant payment, end quote, a category that required no receipts and no follow-up. The vehicle scheme was more elaborate. When a high-value car was forfeited, the department's auctioneer would list it at a public auction. The auctions were held on Saturday mornings at the county fairgrounds. They were sparsely attended. The winning bidder was, in many cases, a limited liability company called Magnolia Holdings, registered to a postal address in a town 50 miles away. Magnolia Holdings had been incorporated in 2015 by an attorney who would later testify that he had filed the paperwork as a favor for the sheriff. The sole member was Darnell Whitaker's brother-in-law, a long-haul truck driver named Reggie Bell, who knew his name was on the documents but did not know what the company was for. Magnolia Holdings purchased 4 vehicles from the Brawley County Sheriff's Office between 2015 and 2020, a 2018 Cadillac Escalade, a 2017 BMW M5, a 2020 Range Rover, and, in March of 2019, a 1969 Chevrolet Chevelle SS, originally seized from a drug suspect in the eastern part of the county, retitled to Magnolia Holdings for the auction price of $9,200. The car's fair market value, restored and documented, was $41,000. The Escalade was kept in the Whitaker's driveway on Magnolia Drive. The BMW was registered to the home but rarely driven. The Range Rover was driven by Patrice Whitaker. The Chevelle was stored under a canvas tarp in a rented pole barn on the property of a man named Dewey Salter, 12 miles outside the county seat. Salter was an old high school football teammate of the sheriff's. The barn rental was paid in cash, $600 a month, and Salter was told only that the car belonged to a private collector who valued discretion. Darnell Whitaker visited the barn most Saturdays. He brought a chamois cloth and a bottle of detail spray and spent 2 or 3 hours working on the car. He had been a Chevelle enthusiast since high school. He had wanted one since he was 16 years old, the year he had counted out his summer earnings on the gas station counter and come up $6,000 short of an asking price. Now he owned one. He had bought it with money that had been seized from a man going to state prison. Over 4 years, forensic accountants would eventually estimate that Darnell Whitaker diverted $1,147,000 from the forfeiture fund. $390,000 of that went to the 4 vehicles. The remainder was used for home renovations, a swimming pool installed in 2019, his daughter's wedding in 2020, and a series of cash withdrawals that the sheriff later refused to explain on the witness stand. The deputies in the field saw the cars. They saw the pool. They heard the rumors. They said nothing. In a department of 112 sworn personnel, only one deputy would eventually decide that what she was seeing was not normal. Her name was Renata Cole. She was 31 years old. She had been a Brawley County deputy for 6 years. She had grown up in the southern part of the county, the daughter of a high school principal and a postal carrier, and she had taken the deputy job out of a community college criminal justice program with the intention of working her way into investigations. She was, by every evaluation in her file, exactly the kind of deputy the department needed. Detail-oriented, calm under pressure. A meticulous report writer, she had been passed over for promotion twice. On the night of October 11, 2020, Deputy Cole pulled over a black sedan on Route 19 for a broken taillight. The driver, a 26-year-old man with 2 prior drug convictions, consented to a search. Cole found a vacuum-sealed bag in the wheel well containing what she counted, at the scene, as $40,000 in 20s and hundreds. She photographed the cash on the hood of the sedan with her department-issued phone. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. She photographed the driver's license. She photographed the registration. She secured the driver and called for a supervisor. The supervisor who arrived was Major Edwin Halsey. Halsey took possession of the cash. He thanked her. He told her to write up her report and go home. Cole did not see the cash counted, recorded, or sealed. She drove back to the substation, wrote her incident report, and clocked out at 3:15 in the morning. 3 days later, she filed a routine follow-up to obtain the deposit slip for her case file. The deposit slip read $22,000. She read it twice. She opened her phone. She looked at her photograph of the cash on the hood. She closed the photograph. She closed the case file. She did not say anything to anyone for 41 days. In the years afterward, she would explain that delay in 2 ways. The first was practical. She had a husband and a 4-year-old daughter and a mortgage and a deputy's salary, and she had watched what happened to deputies who crossed the sheriff's circle. The second was personal. She had voted for Darnell Whitaker 3 times. She had grown up in a county where his face was on a billboard at the I-49 exit. She did not want what she was seeing to be true. What changed her mind was a second seizure. On November 22, a deputy named Wendell Briggs pulled over a pickup truck on the same stretch of Route 19. Cole was the backup unit. She watched Briggs count what he later told her was approximately $27,000 in cash. She watched Major Halsey arrive on scene. She watched the cash leave in Halsey's vehicle. She drove home that night, sat at her kitchen table for 2 hours, and then sent a single email from a personal address to the office of the state auditor. The subject line read, "I have a question about a deposit." She attached one photograph. She attached one deposit slip. She typed 3 sentences. The state auditor's office opened a file the following Tuesday. Stories like this don't get the coverage they deserve. If you want to see more accountability reporting on the people in uniform, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover cases that local news won't touch and national outlets won't follow every single week. The state auditor's office assigned the case to a senior investigator named Francis Okonkwo, a 16-year veteran of the office who had previously led forensic reviews of 2 municipal corruption cases. Okonkwo opened a quiet inquiry on December 8, 2020. She did not contact the sheriff's department. She did not contact the county commission. She requested, through standard open records channels, 4 years of forfeiture account banking records, 4 years of deposit slips, and 4 years of vehicle auction records. The records arrived in February. The numbers did not add up. Across 41 cash seizures of $20,000 or more, the deposits trailed the original incident reports by an average of 33%. In some cases, the discrepancy was thousands of dollars. In one case, involving a $68,000 seizure from a stop near the state line, the deposit was for $39,000. The remainder had been logged as, quote, undercover operational expenditure, end quote, with no supporting documentation. The vehicle records were worse. Of the 17 high-value cars forfeited in auction during the 4-year window, 4 had been purchased by the same buyer, Magnolia Holdings, LLC. The auction prices were, on average, 22% of fair market value. Okonkwo pulled the state filings on Magnolia Holdings. The sole listed member was Reggie Bell. A cross-reference with vital records showed that Reggie Bell was married to a woman named Lavinia Bell, whose maiden name was Whitaker, and that Lavinia Whitaker Bell was the older sister of Darnell Whitaker. The auditor's office referred the case to the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation on April 3, 2021. The BCI investigation took 14 months. Agents interviewed Reggie Bell, who, after consulting with a public defender, admitted that he had no knowledge of the company's operations and had signed the paperwork at his brother-in-law's request. Agents interviewed the attorney who had filed the LLC documents, who produced an email chain showing that the sheriff had personally directed the filing. Agents interviewed Dewey Salter, who walked them out to the pole barn on his property and pulled back the canvas tarp from a meticulously restored 1969 Chevelle SS. The car's VIN matched a vehicle forfeited in March of 2019 from a drug case in eastern Brawley County. The original case file valued the car at $9,200. A specialist hired by the BCI valued the restored car at $43,000. The restoration receipts, obtained from a body shop 2 counties over, totaled $11,400. All of them had been paid in cash. Agents executed a search warrant on the sheriff's home on Magnolia Drive on June 14, 2022. They recovered 3 vehicles registered to Magnolia Holdings. They recovered a personal checkbook the sheriff had kept in a desk drawer in his home office, which documented 23 cash withdrawals from a small Brawley County credit union, each below the $10,000 federal reporting threshold, totaling $184,000 over 31 months. They recovered Deputy Cole's original incident report from October 11, 2020, which had been quietly altered in the department's records system. The cash amount on the official version read $22,000. The original, recovered from a backup server, read $40,000. The smoking gun was already on her phone. A time-stamped photograph. 11:47 p.m. $40,000 in vacuum-sealed 20s and hundreds on the hood of a black sedan. Next to it, in the case file, a department deposit slip for $22,000, a difference of $18,000 in a single night, multiplied by 41 seizures across 4 years. The grand jury was impaneled on August 9, 2022. Darnell Whitaker was arrested in the parking lot of the Brawley County Sheriff's Office on the morning of September 20, 2022, at 7:14 a.m. He had just stepped out of his department vehicle. He was carrying a thermos of coffee and a manila folder. 3 state BCI agents, accompanied by 2 uniformed troopers and an assistant attorney general, approached him at the curb. Whitaker stopped walking. He set the thermos down on the hood of his vehicle. Lead agent, Sheriff Whitaker, we have a warrant for your arrest. 23 counts. Theft of public funds, money laundering, and official misconduct. Whitaker did not move for several seconds. He looked at the manila folder in his hand, then at the agent, then back at the folder. Whitaker, you're serving this here, in my own parking lot. Lead agent, yes sir. Whitaker, is this Major Halsey's doing? Lead agent, Major Halsey was served at his home 30 minutes ago, Sheriff. This is not his doing. Whitaker exhaled through his nose. He set the manila folder down next to the thermos. Whitaker, I want to make a phone call. Lead agent, you'll have that opportunity at the booking facility, Sheriff. Please turn around. He turned around. He did not resist. He did not argue. He placed his hands behind his back without being asked. The lead agent later wrote in his report that Whitaker said one more thing while his wrists were being secured. Whitaker, I built this department. I built every piece of it. He was placed in the back of a state vehicle. The badge on his chest was removed at the booking facility 41 minutes later. He was photographed, fingerprinted, and held without bond, pending arraignment. The arraignment was set for the following morning. The thermos of coffee was still sitting on the hood of his department vehicle when the news vans arrived at the parking lot at 8:15. The trial of Darnell Whitaker began on April 3, 2023, in the Brawley County Superior Court, presided over by Judge Marlena Tidwell, a 22-year veteran of the state bench who had requested the case after the local judge recused himself. The state's case was built around 4 pillars: the forensic accounting reconstruction of the forfeiture fund, the Magnolia Holdings paper trail, the recovered vehicles, including the Chevelle from Dewey Salter's barn, and Deputy Renata Cole, who testified on the 4th day of trial in a navy blue suit with her department badge clipped to her belt. She authenticated the photograph. She walked the jury through the timeline. She explained, in clinical terms, what she had seen on the hood of the sedan and what the deposit slip had said 3 days later. When the defense attorney asked her on cross-examination why she had waited 41 days to report what she had seen, she answered without hesitation, Cole, because I was afraid of him, and because I had voted for him. The defense, led by a former state attorney general named Heath Coombs, argued that the forfeiture fund discrepancies were the product of bookkeeping errors, that the vehicle transactions had been at arm's length, and that the testimony of the cooperating witness Reggie Bell was unreliable. Coombs did not put the sheriff on the stand. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. They returned a verdict on April 20th, 2023, guilty on all 23 counts. Sentencing was set for June 12th. At the sentencing hearing, the Assistant Attorney General presented a victim impact statement on behalf of the citizens of Brawley County. The statement was read by the County Commission Chair, a retired schoolteacher named Lorene Pickett. This man stood at our parade reviewing stand for 10 years. He shook our hands at our funerals. He told us, every campaign cycle, that he had taken the profit out of crime. He told us our money was being used to make our streets safer. And what he actually meant, was that he was using our money to put a sports car under a tarp in a barn outside of town. There is no sentence long enough to repair what he has taken from this county. The trust he stole cannot be returned. Judge Tidwell allowed Whitaker to make a statement before sentencing. He stood at the defense table in a charcoal suit. He spoke for less than 90 seconds. Whitaker, I served this county for 31 years. I made mistakes. I never intended for any of this to happen the way it did. The judge looked at him for a long moment before she responded. Judge Tidwell, Sheriff Whitaker, you took an oath 3 times. You took it in front of your wife. You took it in front of your children. You took it in front of every citizen of Brawley County who voted for you. You did not make a mistake. You made a decision, and then you made it again, 41 times that we know of, over 4 years. You used the trust of your office to enrich yourself at the direct expense of the people who hired you. You took the property of citizens who had no recourse against you, and you put it in your driveway, and when that was not enough, you put it in a barn so that no one would see what you had done. This court has presided over many cases of public corruption. This one is among the worst. She sentenced him to 14 years in state prison. She ordered forfeiture of all 4 vehicles, including the Chevelle. She ordered restitution of $1.1 million. She ordered permanent decertification from law enforcement service in the state. Darnell Whitaker was transported on June 15th, 2023, to the state's Northern Correctional Facility, a medium-security prison 90 miles from the county he had been elected to lead. The facility had been built in 1986. He was housed in protective custody on a tier reserved for former law enforcement officers, separated from the general population for his own safety. He was assigned to a single-occupancy cell. He was scheduled for release in 2035. Major Edwin Halsey pleaded guilty to 3 counts of official misconduct in exchange for his cooperation. He was sentenced to 4 years. Deputy Renata Cole was promoted to lieutenant in the reorganized Brawley County Sheriff's Office in November of 2023. She was offered the position of chief deputy under the new sheriff. She declined. The Chevelle was sold at a public auction administered by the state. The buyer was a collector from out of state. The proceeds were applied to the restitution order. The barn on Dewey Salter's property is empty now. The tarp is folded on a workbench in the corner. Salter has not rented the space to anyone since. This case was hard to sit with, but the case on the right-hand side of your screen is worse. Click it now.